There are certain approaches that have made programming easier for people, that have made billion-dollar companies. And those same techniques have been applied in multiple different sectors of software engineering, but they haven't been applied to crypto yet. Just to like test out your idea and like give it all to AWS. And I was just like, originally, why don't we just like use crypto and like Ethereum and something to figure this out? You don't do anything. It's just like there's some kind of like heart and soul in what you're doing, and like people just show up.
There aren't actually that many developers. They're the bottleneck, I would say, for a lot of these guys. So that's when community building is so important.
It's kind of a mafia. I really hope that gets democratized the same way that like proof of work and like, hash power stuff does as well. Twitter, I think, is the best example. If you look historically to scale, was make a backend that could really handle millions and millions of users, which was actually a big deal back then. Like, I don't have Illuminati connections. I'm not a Silicon Valley darling, but like I built some shit, and I know a lot of really great guys out there that want to build cool stuff. The truth of the matter is that in order to get around these scalability issues, we've sacrificed decentralization.
Hey Wyatt, how you doing?
Doing fantastic. Pleasure to be here. How you doing?
Welcome to We Are DePIN, a podcast dedicated to the world of DePIN projects. Every episode, we invite amazing DePIN projects to explain how they're revolutionizing and shaping the future of DePIN and Web3. Our goal is to keep you informed about everything happening in the DePIN space. This podcast is brought to you by Minima, the real-world blockchain. Minima is a device-agnostic and fully decentralized Layer 1 blockchain. It has a lightweight architecture that enables a full node to run on any mobile or IoT device, making it exceptionally adaptable for scaling decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Minima's technology is now supported by an expansive and engaged community of over 50,000 node operators. Join us for the next insightful discussion. Yeah, great. Pleasure to have you on as well. It's great to meet a DePIN L1 or an L0, as you like to call it. Before we head off, it would be great to hear about yourself. So what sort of industry experience have you come from, Wyatt?
Hey, thanks. So my name is Wyatt Meldman-Floch. My really only claim to fame is that I'm a software engineer, but I have done some work in research and founding companies before. But most recently, I'm running a project called RealityNet, or Reality for short. And it's, to your point, a kind of DePIN, almost like powered, we call it, L0 or L1. Yeah.
So let's talk about why you started in the first place. Especially starting in L0, you must have seen a lot of foundational problems that exist in the DePIN space. So I'm interested to hear your story behind why, like what invigorated you to build it.
So the term L0 is really funny because I wrote this paper back in like 2019 that I published on just kind of like a general framework for modeling blockchains, using some of the new approaches that people are using, like with statistical dynamics and stuff, basically treating like distributed systems like an engine. There's a couple of dudes like Maurice Herlihy at Brown, the research group actually that published my paper, had done someone's PhD thesis on this. But the TLDR here is that the actual like thing itself, the model, basically shows that you can connect and sort of chain together consensus processes and then get certain guaranteed results out if you define your actual primitives in a certain way. And so it was really like a proof paper on a certain primitive that I used to actually build reality. And what was really funny is that the actual thing that kind of defines like what makes reality different from like other consensus protocols is that in this kind of like chain of different consensus processes, it's just like zero, like starts at zero and it like moves to whatever. So I was like, well, it's just the L0 part of that. And then some other people came up with the idea, and I think everybody had a similar sort of vibe. And but yeah, I don't know. That's sort of why I call it that. I think people have their own meanings for it. I don't know if it's necessarily like hardened per se, but I am an L1, and that is a fact. Maybe an L0 depending on how you define it. But yeah.
And why? What invigorated you to start in the first place? Like what sort of problems did you see in the industry that thought an L1 would solve this problem?
I really like the ethos of crypto, and but I kind of got into it, I'd say like middle of my career, kind of like in my mid-20s, as someone who was actually like building something. So I originally was like going to get like a physics PhD, but eventually just went and got a real industry job as a software engineer, and focused mainly on like distributed systems for like machine learning type stuff. So there's a lot of like math people, but also like a lot of people getting really good at like doing systems type things, and scaling up, how to actually implement, productionize these like solutions to problems and whatnot. So I was doing that. I lived in San Francisco for like literally like right after college until a few months after I turned 30. And pretty much for the majority of that time before the first company that I founded, I was working on like actual data tools and using some new techniques to create applications that can like scale based upon or as a function of the number of nodes or servers that are actually like applied to the problem. So how would I put this? Like, if you ever heard something like Spark, I think is probably like the biggest big data tool out there. It follows a very similar principle where you can speed up jobs by adding a number of servers to your like compute cluster or whatnot. And so there's a history to that actually that even predates me, where like most of what we call like Web 2 is actually an evolution from like Web 1, or what we call like monolithic architectures, or like, Ruby on Rails like monoliths. And really what kind of like got like Twitter, I think, is the best example if you look historically to scale, was actually just building some of these tools to then parallelize and like, make a backend that could really handle millions and millions of users, which was actually a big deal back then. So yeah, sort of fast forward to like, maybe like 7-ish years ago, I got into like Ethereum, and, I was looking at like the parity implementation of the node, and I was, just really interested in the stuff. And I tried to do some things with smart contracts that I realized like there was some serious limitations with how you can prove stuff within like a super limited opcode sandbox. Even just like making method calls between smart contracts, that was like a big deal. Like literally like a project called Archain was like, that was like, they did a lot of great shit, and I know the guy who made it. He was a really nice dude, brilliant dude. And but it was just interesting because like one of the big things I remember that they did differently was like being able to like do smart contracts in parallel. Anyway, bottom line here was I read the Plasma white paper, and also like got sort of keyed into Polkadot, just randomly like meeting some people at a conference like Gav2. And I was like, I really think the future here is that like L1s themselves, like in order to actually get users the same way that like Web 2 apps actually got users with those types of models, they need to fix a fundamental scalability problem. And functionally, like a lot of the stuff I was saying a long time ago about like proof of work is just becoming infinitely more centralized, like from people who can just like buy hardware or also like be a part of mining rigs. Proof of stake is basically just buying your way in. The truth of the matter is that like in order to get around these scalability issues, we've sacrificed decentralization. And so what I really just sort of saw as like the crux of like what crypto made it like great was the ability to allow individuals to participate in some kind of like a shared, like reality, a shared kind of system or experience. In this case, specifically at least first applied to money, but eventually just towards how we actually like organize and sort of like govern ourselves as like a society in general. So yeah, and I mean, that was pretty much it. So the TLDR here is that I was like, I can rewrite consensus so that it will scale like how Web 2 and the big data movement like was able to scale. And our thing, like our nodes can run on like personal devices, computers. We have an Android app. There's a big push I'll tell you about later, but yeah, basically anybody can just run an application on their consumer devices and start getting paid. And that basically crowdsources like compute power or like hash power, if you will, to solve similar problems like around finance, like with our native token net. And also like, hosting applications, what smart contracts we're trying to do, and localizing data as well, which I think is a big DePIN thing. So that was what I was inspired to do. I worked on it a long time. I have some papers I'll share, I'll tell you more about it, but that's my shtick, and I'm sticking to it. So yeah.
And that's how reality was born, basically, from the back end of that.
Yeah, reality was born. It's quite a long journey, but I'll tell you, it was a vision that was sort of like partially like moved towards with various different like teams and projects. But this is really just sort of like the core of like what I wanted to do for many years, and I made a lot of great friends and colleagues, and everybody who's like ready to really make this vision that we're kind of like, you spend 7 years seeing something like amazing kind of happen. We're ready to sort of bring it out. So it's a big deal for us.
Mm. And what was the challenges when it came to building something like that? Because as you said, you need projects to be built on top of what you guys are doing in terms of just for the scalability. So like, what was the biggest challenge when it came to building and launching a project like yours?
I'll tell you, like, there's a lot of stuff to launching like a crypto project in general, specifically in L1, that's like very unique to that problem you're doing. That being said, just to keep it light and positive, it was honestly just like a real personal kind of journey, just trying to see like what I could actually like do and push forward. For me, it was like, I had to basically go take like what I got good at, like at my job, and really sort of teach myself sort of what I didn't do, by like not getting a PhD or whatnot. And basically, like my whole shtick was like trying to take research papers and turn them into production code. That's like what I was really good at in my career. And so I just started writing the research papers myself. And then writing the code too. So yeah, the hardest thing basically was like I had to teach myself a new type of math that like I'd never really done before. Like I had a little bit as like an engineer, software engineer, but specifically into like type theory and category theory. Ironically, I had known category theory, I just didn't know it. In college, there's this thing called differential geometry. Like it's like the final calculus class you take, and there's lots of shit in there that you don't really understand what you're doing. Then eventually I was like, okay, I get it now. But yeah, and it was honestly just a journey like towards like what are we even really trying to do in computing? And so the final form of like what reality is isn't necessarily just the ability to run these nodes. It's to be able to crowdsource like the computational energy, if you will, which goes into hosting applications. And so what we're actually really moving towards is creating something called a distributed interpreter, where essentially like there is one sort of parallelized program across all machines, sort of like a sharded runtime. And all these different runtimes can talk to one another and introspect about their program state effectively within like various limitations, solving the halting problem, which is like what smart contracts wanted to do. But it does it from a kind of more like holistic perspective using just pure types and actually how to put this. You can get compile time checks when you write your code that it's going to work or not. The same way that people have to like write separate proofs in like Coq or the COQ, the prover language, TLS, that kind of TLA, whatever. Yeah, and this is kind of like built in. So the TLDR here is that what I wanted to do is create the ability for anyone to use consensus as a tool, as kind of like a truth machine for handling whether it's finance, some kind of personal application, whatever, and then just use it almost the same way you would build like an HTTP server. So if you look at our like developer documentation, like in there, the whole TLDR here is that you can create these consensus processes within a certain type of a monad that I call a cell. And essentially what that means is that the way that you interact with these things is kind of like how in React there are futures and promises and that kind of stuff. It's a similar type effect. So a lot of people have seen this before. And I just dig it because I feel like I can do so much stuff with it now. So I'm like really excited to launch this project and just get everybody building, but also just to see what I can build with this thing too, because yeah, I mean, this is kind of like what I think consensus should have been. And to your point, and thank you for having me on the DePIN podcast. I think the real core like magic was like what we're identifying with the value in DePIN is actually what's solving that core scalability, like trilemma or whatever people say, with just consensus in general.
Mm. My question to you though, so when it comes to, because there's so many L1s now, and that's like, from a marketing standpoint alone, it's so difficult to differentiate yourself. And there is an element of marketing to like building that developer ecosystem, right? So what would you say is the key differentiator from yourselves and other L1s, and why should developers build on reality?
Sure. So like what's really different about us kind of comes with I made this thing for people who like want to launch a token or sort of make like a specialized L1 application. So what this is a blockchain in a box framework, kind of like Polkadot. And basically, I added some really special bells and whistles in there that I can tell you if you've not launched a project, you're really going to want because I'm a little bit scarred from them. And one of them specifically is like a guaranteed like exchange listing. So like, what do I mean? When you build one of our applications and use our framework, what you're actually doing is creating your own standalone L1 that can connect to other L1s using what I call, at least in my papers, the L0 process. And so, or the L omega process actually specifically now, to differentiate, if you read the most recent paper, it's called L omega now. But the TLDR here is that you can basically swap values directly between independent L1s, not just like, between smart contracts or something on like Ethereum, but like literally Bitcoin and Ethereum. And like your L1 tokens. So when you launch with us, you're basically just like getting your own kind of like liquidity pool and everything built in. Because these swaps don't require liquidity pools, they just match directly using the mempool as an order book. So for me, I was just going through that process and dealing with exchanges and just all the crap that you need to do just sort of deal with the, commercial component. I think this is really important because it allows individuals to just like build important products and not really have to think about, just like dealing with kingpins. And, I mean, it's kind of a mafia. So I really hope that gets democratized the same way that like proof of work and like, hash power and stuff does as well. So that's one thing I would say just from an operational standpoint. And then also from a developer standpoint, like the way that this thing is built is going to be very similar to how if you've ever built just like an HTTP server or like use something with React. And so you can do so much with this. You can basically just like write scripts to launch Bitcoin processes, Ethereum processes, whatever, swap tokens between them, write jobs between them, like long scale data processing operations like streaming topologies. There's an FS2 API. I mean, it basically just made like a big data tool that pipes data through consensus as though it's an extra layer on top of HTTPS. So the truth of the matter is that like the big data movement and like one of the biggest things about, me being in the data world, a lot of my buddies wanted to like found companies and shit is that like it's you have to have so much overhead just to like test out your idea and like give it all to AWS. And I was just like, originally, why don't we just like use crypto and like Ethereum and something to figure this out? And so eventually it took me on this wild rabbit ride to where I built this framework where it's like, hey, this is how you build a new HTTP server with consensus built in so that like you can reuse all the hard work without like doing it again. So yeah.
And then when it comes to community building, so building that community of developers, how do you plan on doing that?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of companies that I have really good relationships with from the past who've like used older tech I've built, and people are using our thing like this new version in their kind of like pre-existing products, which is kind of cool. So that's going to be a part of our our marketing push. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I'm going grassroots. We have a developer framework it kind of sits on top of something called Cat's Effect, which is like it's a big thing in the Scala world. It's kind of like Cats versus Zio, but whatever. I'll let you read up on that. But the TLDR, I do like Zio. I like John DeGoes for anyone out there. He's my boy. But the TLDR here is that this is basically a plugin that kind of fits in within the Scala ecosystem. We were able to solve a longstanding problem, or at least a really difficult set of problems, which is trying to get Scala projects on Android phones. We met a really awesome dude named Maciek. Shout out, I guess shout out. But thank you, the Scala and Android community. And so yeah, we've shared that. We worked with him and shared that, and we're really excited to share that and show that like what's possible. Now, like, I long story short is like it's really hard to put a Scala project on an Android device, and like just for a long wind of reasons we figured out how to do it. So we're really glad that we could show people how to do that, and like maybe you can just like run consensus with Scala on Android devices as well. So yeah, that's it's kind of it. I want to tap into the whole like $1 billion movement that like ran Databricks or like sort of fueled that, which was the creation of like a really simple functional backend API that like data scientists and like non-technical people could use, data analysts, to build data pipelines. I want to do the same thing for people to like build consensus networks. So yeah.
Mm. With my experience, like when it came to working with L1s before, is that you have to create a very inclusive environment for developers because they're the sort of key lifeblood of an L1 activity. You have to have projects built on it. You have to have developers interested in what you guys are doing, and the big reason is there aren't actually that many developers. That's the thing. They're the bottleneck, I would say, for a lot of these guys. So that's when community building is so important, and the marketing aspect is so important.
I agree completely, and I think, I mean, look, like I don't have Illuminati connections, I'm not a Silicon Valley darling, but like I've built some shit, and I know a lot of really great guys out there that want to build cool stuff, like with what we're doing. So I'm just leaning into it. The reality of the situation is that Databricks became a multi-billion-dollar like leader of the data industry because open source devs like love Spark so much that they made it like totally rock. Multiple projects, not even Databricks, like just associated, like made it rock. And I've seen that work. And the truth is, you don't do anything. It's just like there's some kind of like heart and soul in what you're doing, and like people just show up. That's the truth. And like when people start just showing up and really helping you, it's like holy shit, like we're doing the right thing.
Mm. Well, like if you look at it from like I guess with the lens of, so you have X number of developers right now that exist in the whole blockchain space, and they're kind of spread out. Like from you as an L1, you can try attract like Y% of those developers, or you can try at the same time make your protocol easier to build on top of, and then attract developers that are in a different pool, right? So that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, like, I've done a lot of shit. I've like bridged different like industries, but I will tell you, like, you know what? The smartest thing you can do is copy something that worked. You know what I mean? Like, look, the long story short is that like there are certain approaches that have made development, like programming, easier for people that have made billion-dollar companies, and those same techniques have been applied in multiple different sectors of software engineering, but they haven't been applied to crypto yet. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. I think
We're
you
the
stated it
Uber
amazingly.
for that. Yeah. Hey man, keep it light. We gotta have fun. We're having fun.
Okay, let me talk to you about the future of reality. So you said you're going through um fundraising for the business, but in terms of like roadmap of what's exciting you building forward, like what's on the radar that you can share?
Yeah, so it's been really cool. You know, really thankful. Things have been really good in terms of just like bootstrapping everything. We've had a lot of success. We closed one round in stealth, and we've got another one we're closing. So we're sort of in stealth right now. I haven't like totally done a big pit push. It just came on my radar. I was like, I'm gonna do sort of a pre out of stealth, but we're about to close the second one before then. So feeling good. If anybody's interested in that or like how that stuff works, you can take a look on our website and get in contact with us. Um, and so that's been great. And yeah, I mean, I have a lot of individuals have sort of worked towards this common goal from various different angles, and like worlds together have sort of joined forces like on a team independently. Like it's great. And so we have started just sort of snowballing that. And so where is this going to go? We have a couple of really great projects, pre-existing ones, with some awesome applications that are going to come out, be added to our examples page on our dev docs, which is really cool. Um, I'm really excited to explore more of like our tokenomics and this kind of just like removal from like centralized exchange or centralized processes, aspect for developers, and almost to kind of like use that in lieu of just like giving people like a ton of free tokens and stuff, to just start building things. So I think there's a really great program. Well, there is one that we're working on. We're excited to share with you guys as well with governance. And yeah, so just shout out to Brian as well. We've got a huge governance doc that I think a lot of people from like an ethos perspective in crypto are going to be really excited for. And I don't want to give too many drops and like announce the announcements, but I mean, yeah, basically like anyone who's like seen my older tech, anyone can run a node now. So like we're just really excited to begin that rollout, and just sort of democratize and finally fulfill what everybody wanted. You know who you are.
Going back to use cases, and I guess with a focus on DePIN, given we're a DePIN podcast, what's the given what you guys are building, what are the sort of like long-term implications for, certain industries?
Yeah. I mean, so this is like, I'm really glad to bring this up too. And so I'm kind of like, I don't want to say I'm new to DePIN and sort of talk down too much, but like, I feel like I've been doing DePIN for a long time before it was called DePIN, but just sort of got connected. And so I went to some cool conferences, met with a colleague of yours and got connected. And so I think that DePIN is really just like the realization of like the dream of what crypto was meant to be from a long time ago. I mean, I remember I saw some like cartoon video that like I think it was like Mark Andreessen gave a speech at some random conference I was at in Silicon Valley, and it was like, oh, we're going to create this world of interconnected devices and all this kind of thing, and it was just like, but like at its core, you know what I mean? Like DePIN is us trying to solve the individual facets of creating this world of interconnected devices that removes dependency on like single points of failure, whether that be from an ideological or like operational or just a logistical standpoint. I mean, this could be like a bridge, this could be like a government, this could be a policy, but we can sort of like move around that using applications of consensus and sort of like what has become what we call DePIN. In a lot of ways, I think a lot of L2s can sort of be classified in the DePIN space. But yeah, DePIN is really just how would I put this? Like DePIN, I think, is the perspective that is going to be the future of all of crypto as we know it, and that the billion-dollar apps that are not yet on chain, they're going to be DePIN because how are you going to generate actual traffic, which equates to demand pressure for these tokens? If you don't have, I mean, look, good luck getting 10 billion users, and how many of those 10 billion users are going to use every day. But if you can strap up a bunch of different devices all over the place with micropayments, that's when you start tapping into like serious margins and like real seriously powerful apps. So yeah, I also think that's kind of what made the internet really powerful, is like being able to process just lots of people beyond just like a storefront. And I sort of watched that as I grew up and was a programmer and became a professional. So
And which sort of industries do you reckon, like just cherry picking from like a reality standpoint, um, like where do you feel like you guys will play the most in, or is that not for you to say?
no, I definitely would say that like I think we have an angle on kind of like a D cloud type angle, but it's a little bit different than like how deep cloud is sort of known today, being like a replacement for AWS. I think that our application development framework and the way that we're actually the application deployment and like tokenomics and governance framework basically allow you to with one extra feature, allow you to host like ordinary Turing complete Web 2 applications with some of the bells and whistles of, like a dApp, which I think is going to be like a key feature to, meet in the middle between like the actual like crypto people who want to fund DePIN and then like developers who want to build like, DePIN focus as opposed to like, DeFi or, that kind of crypto focus thing. So that's kind of like where our niche is, and just moving beyond specific like health checks. I think a lot of these different projects use. People are trying to do stuff with zk snarks in order to solve to some degree the halting problem, just on like pure like an actual like executable. But there's actually a new thing that came out called execution hashing, which is like super fucking cool. And there was a paper that came out like 2 years ago. But the bottom line here is that it's an approach where you basically map the entire search space of all the method calls into a type tree. I actually like did something from a similar perspective in another paper that was a preprint. I'll maybe mention it later, but um, the TLDR here is that with a compiler plugin, you can basically output a DAG of proofs for a Web2 application, essentially like within a certain limitation of like methods. Not We're not talking like smart contracts. We're just talking like you can't run for loops. You have to use something called partial recursion or general recursion. And so if you can define your thing in general recursion, you can basically get proofs about like the actual like executable black box things, and then program states wrapping those black boxes. So I think that was a really terrible way of basically just saying we have a compiler plugin that within, if you use our special framework, will give you like some kind of halt free proof on the execution of just some black box executable, as long as it's like compiled using the LLVM. That's kind of something really new, and I just sort of saw that in like a journal, and found some open source code, and started going down that road. So that's a cool niche. In terms of DePIN itself, I think DePIN is just going to kill L2s. I mean, DePIN is basically like you need to either figure out using a blockchain in a box kind of framework, like me, Polkadot, whatever, or just kind of like really focusing on different types of consensus. I even kind of consider like Filecoin and some of those proof of spaces, like early DePIN, like ethos type, like problems to solve, essentially around just like storage. And I think that trying to actually like use consensus as like an application, I think that's what's going to power DePIN. People are like, the L1s are saturated in the space. Like I do agree, but like they're really the ones that like are have at least some kind of an angle to be used. I think they're few and far in between. Um, yeah. So yeah. God, I feel like I'm talking way too much. This is my first podcast in a really long time, so thank you all for bearing with me.
No, we're gonna actually like wrap it up soon, anyways. But in terms of, because I want to ask you a question that we ask all our guests that come on the We Are DePIN podcast, and that is, what is you're kind of alluding to it there a little bit, but what is your favorite use case of DePIN outside of what you guys are immediately doing? And that could be something that you've seen in the industry. It could be a certain company that's doing amazing work. It could be something that a use case that you've not even seen yet, but you think, it will change and disrupt certain industries?
Yeah, I mean, not to basically give people a bunch of free alpha, but just to tell you the truth, like I think that new approaches to program verification, like beyond ZK proofs, like that execution hash thing, I think that is what's going to enable like DePIN and sort of like custom consensus focused like type networks for specific physical infrastructure applications, to basically just like do really amazing stuff, like reactive, like distributed, like physical things like drones, like with specific security guarantees around performance. I didn't actually mention I have a lot of history doing stuff with the Department of Defense. I have an ongoing thing right now I don't really want to like talk about yet, but yeah, I've been doing that for a while. So there's massive cybersecurity implications for this as well, and I can tell you for a fact that like there is a lot of money on the security side for DePIN, and yeah, that's where honestly the biggest proof point in our like revenue stream besides the token right now, at least for reality, has been.
So specifically within cybersecurity?
Yeah. We're working with a group that's really focused, like military intelligence group that's really focused with cybersecurity and doing stuff around using just basically trying to create DePIN networks to solve security problems. And like I will tell you, like there's a lot of demand for that with a lot of budget in a certain world. But the real thing that's interesting about those guys, I have to tell you, is like you never think of that like the DoD like cares. They want it to be decentralized. They really see that as being the core value prop. And so unless you're like truly decentralized, that's kind of the differentiator, I think, in the cybersecurity world with actually using a consensus network to solve a problem.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we had DATS project, sorry, on our podcast before, and like they're specialized specifically on cybersecurity. So yeah, I completely agree with you. That's a big use case. Again, like multi-billion-dollar industry as a whole, and making it decentralized has a load of different benefits that come with it, including cost, but like also from quality of testing.
Or like replacing certificate authorities. Like let's just go back to basics. There's so much shit we can do with the plethora of DePIN tools out there. And so I kind of think DePIN's gonna mix with the data world. I think that's how we're gonna do it. So let's see.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see where the sector goes next for sure. We're going to wrap up the podcast there, but it's been such a pleasure having you on. How can people stay in touch with you and Reality going forward?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm on Twitter, although I haven't posted in ages. But my hashtag's at Wyatt_noise, and I'll give you links to our Twitter and our new Telegram and yeah, our website, etc. And for all there should be information on the website for all the different types of questions and ways you might want to get involved. So feel free to just fill out our form and get in contact with the team. And yeah, there's also various different like chats and whatnot if you're a developer, if you want to run nodes, all this kind of stuff, investors, these kind of things. So everybody's got a place, and just come on in and come hang.
Nice one. And yeah, those links will be in the description. So thank you so much, Wyatt, for coming on again. And yeah, I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion, brought to you by Minima, the real world blockchain. The only layer 1 blockchain lean and compact enough to run in full on any mobile or IoT device. If you're new to DePIN, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date. Thank you so much again. We'll catch you in the next episode.